It's not that difficult to get the fundamentals of a basic bike fit pretty much spot on. I'm talking about things such as saddle height. But there are a few subtle changes that you can make that will make a huge difference to your confidence on the bike, to your comfort, and probably to how fast you go too.
Yeah, and a professional bike fit can be, well, pretty costly. So coming up are 6 positional tweaks you can make to get the perfect position. And I mean, well, who wouldn't want that?
I expect you'd like it.
Mate,
I mean, there is a lot of work to do here, James. And we're going to start with handlebar rotation, because that's certainly not the first thing that most riders will think about when it comes to the position on their bike. But where your handlebars are rotated forwards or backwards can make quite a big difference to how your bike feels underneath you, as indeed can the position of your hoods on the bars themselves. So it's worth having a play about with it.
Yeah, so if we start with rotating our hoods forwards, that essentially gives you a longer reach and increases the drop between your saddle height and your hoods, making yourself more aerodynamic and, well, lower on the front end.
On the other hand, if you rotate your bars backwards or you move the hoods further upwards around the bars, you can have much more of a sort of locked-in feel on the bike, and you will have reduced both your reach and your drop.
Yes, so grab an indoor trainer and experiment so you can get your position dialed in.
Now, as well as the rotation of your bars, you could also try changing the shape completely. Compacts are a relatively recent invention in road cycling. They've been more commonplace in the last 10 years or so, because traditionally road bike handlebars had a really deep drop, and what that meant was that the difference of your position on the hoods versus being on the drops was really quite significant.
Yes, and for many riders, this was, well, uncomfortably low. So they came up with a compact, which allowed you to be in the drops for those long rides without getting much discomfort. This is best for those aggressive style riders.
Yeah, I mean, so have a look at your... You think you're aggressive, do you?
Yeah.
Have a look at the bars that you've got at home, and if they are the old traditional shape with a really deep drop, and you're finding that you can't get comfortable either on the hoods or the drops, then it might be worth experimenting with compact handlebars and maybe just try to borrow some rather than putting out the expenditure before you decide what's right for you. Next up, layback. This is saddle layback, which is effectively how far your saddle is behind the centre of the bottom bracket. You can have 2 extremes when it comes to this. Traditionally, road bikes have had a reasonably large layback, so the saddle's been quite a way behind the bottom bracket. And at the other extreme, you have time trialists, and even more extreme than that, you have triathletes who basically have no layback at all.
Yes, and getting the wrong layback, well, can significantly affect your power and, well, give you a whole host of knee problems. And, well, we don't want that. And interestingly, there was a study done that shows there was a higher compression force on the knee when your saddle was further back.
Yeah, which went against what I would have predicted, in fact. Bear in mind a couple of things, that when you experiment with your saddle layback, you will also be changing your reach, so bear that in mind. And also, if you move your saddle forward, for example, you'll also need to raise it ever so slightly too. Next up, saddle tilt. Now, believe it or not, the International Cycling Union, or the UCI, for a few years banned pro riders from tilting their saddle downwards towards the front because they thought it was in some ways performance enhancing. And what that meant was that we had a number of pro riders who complained of being numb and losing feeling in a place where you don't really want to lose your feeling.
Yeah, not so much. So to rectify that situation is you can slightly tilt your nose downwards, which will allow you to put more power out in a more aerodynamic position and will relieve a lot of the pressure on your perineum, which will actually make your ride a lot more comfortable.
It can also help if you're a rider that tends to stay seated on longer climbs, because in that situation, if you have your saddle level, when the road tilts upwards, it can feel like you're constantly slipping off the back of your saddle. This has to be one of the least commonly adjusted parts of a bike, which is strange because actually it makes a huge difference potentially to both your confidence on the bike and your control over it. So most modern designs of brake and gear shifters will allow you to adjust how far the lever is away from your handlebars, which is particularly useful for those of you who've got smaller hands, because if you can't easily reach the brake lever, not only is it going to affect your braking, but also your ability to change gear, which at best is annoying and at worst is frankly dangerous.
Yes, and different levers are adjusted in different ways. But in general, there's a small screw at the back of the hood, which will allow you to adjust the lever. You want to comfortably be able to reach your lever from the hoods and the drops. And if you need to adjust your hands, it's probably worth bringing in your levers a little bit, just to make it that little bit more comfortable.
And finally, we have crank length, which admittedly can be quite expensive to experiment with. So if you do want to try changing it about, maybe try borrowing some different cranks first. A few considerations when it comes to choosing your optimal crank length. Firstly, the type of riding you do. Secondly, your preferred cadence, and also, of course, the length of your legs too. Tendency at the moment is to go a little bit shorter when it comes to cranks. Firstly, it helps those of you who like to have a higher cadence. And secondly, for time trialists and triathletes, they're finding it's kind of opening up their hip angle and making it easier to ride in that super aggressive aero position.
Yeah, so if you are struggling to put that power out in that aerodynamic position, it might be worth thinking about shortening your crank length. But just remember, if you shorten your crank length, make sure you adjust your saddle height also. So for example, if you're going for a longer crank length of around 2.5 millimeters, then make sure you drop your saddle height by 2.5 millimeters also.
Hopefully, amongst those tips, you will find a couple of ways to get yourself more comfortable on your bike. Handily, as you will have noticed, not many of them, or hardly any, actually cost any money. So you don't have to spend the earth to get yourself into the perfect position. What you do need to do is invest your own time into it. And we would also suggest that when you make any adjustments, you note down what you've done and even film yourself on the bike on the turbo trainer so you can see how it looks.
Yeah, and just those little tweaks have helped me feel more comfortable on the bike. And if they've helped you, then why not give this video a thumbs up? And if you've got any hacks that we've missed that make you feel more comfortable on the bike, then do let us know in the comment section below.
Yeah, definitely. If there's anything significant in your time riding a bike which you would like to share with us and indeed with our viewers, we would love to hear from you. Now, we've got another video coming up for you now. This was something that Emma did a few weeks back. This is bike setup tips for people that are smaller in stature. So if that's the case for you, click just down here.
Yeah, I'll be doing that.